Hey everyone, it's Sleepyreader, aka Damien, and let me lay on you the first of my comic book confessions. When I first was thinking about starting a channel and doing YouTube comic book videos like I was seeing other people doing, my first thought was I would do a digital comic book haul. I would show off some of the best comics I'd found digitally in the past year before I started the channel. Um, and luckily, I didn't do that. So this is my eighth anniversary on um, April 2012, the 28th of April 2012. I think late at night, I posted my very first video and started my Sleepy Reader channel. Before that, I'd been commenting on a lot of people's videos as Damien Kilby or something along those lines. Um, so that is when Sleepy Reader was born, because I had to make up a name for the channel, and Sleepy Reader popped into my head, and then it said, "Yo, you can't just be Sleepy Reader. You have to have a number." So I added 666 because of my name, Damien. Um, so my first video was called "Small Comic Book Haul and Unboxing of Narnia Books." I took a little baby step. I think I talked about some Peanuts comic books that I was reading with my daughter, and some Scrooge McDuck comic books that I tried to read with my daughter, but it didn't work out so well. My description under the video was my first video. I've been enjoying comic book videos by Ghost Critic, Howler Mouse, a comic book mom, MAW00001, Dragonheart Collects. Does anyone remember Dragonheart Collects anymore? I'm sure very few people remember most of these people anymore. Andrew Cutter 2, Poet Skinny, and many others. So I thought I'd take the plunge. Hopefully I will improve with time. And I think I did improve a little bit with a little bit of time, and then stayed about the same. But I probably should have mentioned other people that influenced me, such as, to get on at that point, such as Edward2962 and 123 Comic Book Man and Crom to One, and especially Constant Bromstar. So yeah, I it was those guys and what they were doing. I was trying to do something somewhat like them, but part of the aspect of all those people is each one was just very unique and sharing the fun of comics in whatever way they felt like it. And it was a conversation bouncing back between all of them. And I was like, hey, I want to butt in on this conversation and be part of it too. Some of my first comments were from Minutia Minute, who I still miss a lot, and Cursive Man, who I was really into Cursive Man for quite a while, and then he moved off and did other kind of non-comic book videos. And James Crowder, who I don't know if James is still out there, but I always liked James Crowder. And he maybe started right around the same time as me, but he was one of the first people to leave a comment on my videos. And other early supporters were Roger69501, who I think is still out there making videos, although Roger, I haven't seen any videos from you too recently. Oddfellow Thoughts, who's still going, albeit at a slower pace than he used to. And another big early supporter was Phil Mars, who I once had a very poor Wi-Fi connection kind of video conversation with him once upon a time. And I always wished we could talk more. And I found out from Ed that he had passed away. So that's just wanted to kind of salute those early people, early to me. Later, I found out about other people who were earlier than me, such as Wednesday Serial, aka Agent 42Q. And I very quickly found out about Captain Strangelife and realized he was the early cement and not only the kind of the greatest collector amongst us, but also the early cement that made this YouTube comic book community build the foundation of it. He's the foundation, or the foundation builder. And I remember being very pleased once I got a comment on my first video from him a little bit later, where he wrote, very nice first video. I'll be looking forward to watching the rest you have uploaded so far. Welcome to our wonderful community of collectors. And it really felt that way to me. And when I got up to 70 subscribers, I felt I had it made. I felt like everyone who counted was watching my videos, or subscribed and occasionally watching, as I later kind of realized. So I called out for questions, and I'm going to kind of pick and choose. I'm going to try to get to all the questions, but maybe at first I was going to do them in order that I received them, but I decided not to do that. So I think I'll start with Grayman's question. He asked, and he says it's an impossible question to answer, what is your favorite video of all the ones you've created? And of course that is impossible, and there's a lot of my, quote, sleepy vlogs that I really like. And I do listen back to my videos. At first I couldn't stand doing it, but I don't usually watch very much, but I'll listen to myself and hope that I will improve later on. But I think my ultimate video for me was a very early one I did called Why Are Comic Books So Addictive? And other people kind of took that up and addressed that issue in a kind of chain of videos. And ultimately, ETA Nick probably did like 50 or 60 Why Are Comic Books So Addictive videos. So he kind of took that idea and ran with it way more than I did. But that was that, and another video I did where I talked about artists versus writers, which a lot of other people talked about. One thing I liked was just when we would pass the conversation along from video to video. And so when I created videos that people actually responded to that way, that was really cool. So another confession is, at first when I started, I wasn't sure if I should tell my wife I was doing these videos. And I probably took a few weeks of doing videos before I mentioned to her that I was doing them. And I remember I started by show her an example of what it was like. I showed her a Poet Skinny video because I thought he seemed the most sane and reasonable and well, sort of speaking well and expressing himself well of all of us. So that's kind of funny. I now suddenly remembered as I confessed that. That's the video I showed her. So Comic Book Crack, my longtime buddy from YouTube, he started just, 3 or 4 months after I did. So he's coming up on his 8th anniversary pretty soon. He asks, do you have a top 3, top 5 comics you picked up or got into because of YouTube that you might not have been exposed to otherwise? And there's so many there, really. Sometimes it's a case of something that I've heard of it, but I just never thought to collect it till I heard people talking about it. Other times it's something I just never heard of, and they talked about it so much that I went ahead and dove in. One of the greatest cases of that is Oddfellow Thoughts, who was pushing the Sixth Gun from the moment I first saw his videos, and eventually he sent out gave a whole bunch of people the first trade, and I loved it so much that I decided to collect the deluxe editions. Here's the 6th edition, which finally came out, the 6th volume, the final volume in the Sixth Gun series, and it's such a unique and fun series and great horror Western comic that anyway, that was a big deal, that a comic book that, well, I don't know if it would have still existed without the Oddfellow Thoughts, but I bet he sold a lot of Sixth Gun. And then I was aware of Jeff Darrow, and I knew he did a comic book called Shaolin Cowboy, but it was really when La Raza started talking about it a lot, and how she'd collected the individual issues from the Burly Man group. Then I imitated her, and I went out and bought those issues. And eventually I bought the hardcover of the same. So now I have all of the Shaolin Cowboy comics in hardcover, and I think I also have them all in paperback. And it's a lot of it due to La Raza talking about it a lot. And a number of people, I'm thinking mostly maybe Gore Vidal and maybe Earl Grey and maybe some other people talked about Manera quite a bit, and I don't think I would have ever thought of, let's see if I can find, thought of picking up his books without them talking about him a lot. So that comes to mind. I still plan to buy more. I've only got 1 or 2 of these. And then, speaking of Oddfellow Thoughts, and actually a lot of other people on YouTube, we're talking about the Immortal Hulk, and I did not jump in on this till like what, issue 13 or 14, and then I had to kind of backfill. But I had been burned on so many Hulk runs previous to this in recent times. I mean, I like a lot of. There's been other good Hulk runs in my opinion, but this is probably the best ever, and it took everyone talking about it to convince me to go and buy it. And I'm so glad I did. And in fact, I don't have it right here, but I bought some original art from it also. And here's one I knew about and I'd read, a few pages of at some point in my life in reprint magazines back in the 70s, but then kind of forgot all about that this would be something I'd want to collect until Earl Grey did a feature on these the Library of American Comics collections of Terry and the Pirates. So I ran out and I bought several volumes, and I got some other volumes out of the library, but I still haven't read it all, so I need to dig in. But he just reminded me of the greatness and the importance of Milton Caniff's Terry and the Pirates, and so that was a big deal for me. And just recently, MedericRoger was talking about this obscure version of Captain Marvel from MF Enterprises. It's really kind of goofy superhero who can shoot off parts of his body, and I just couldn't. It was just the kind of comic book oddity. I love the comic book oddities that I learn about on YouTube, and then I want to collect them. And finally, Travis Comics with Bueller and Bullseye Bob from Everything Comics were talking about Kill Lock, and this is one, a very good example of a modern indie that I just would never have heard of, and it's proved to be a very unique and interesting story taking place in a sci-fi universe made up entirely of robots. So that's fascinating stuff. So thanks for that question, Terrence. I think, and you also asked, are you considering flipping some of the more expensive sought-after books to bankroll some of the other stuff you've been eyeballing? I have not really thought about that. I guess possibly some of the books my friend Bruce sent me recently are worth some money, and I wouldn't automatically be a Spider-Man collector, but everything else I have because I wanted it, and have not considered flipping anything. I mean, for what, like I've heard, there's also the sort of things you literally can flip if you flip them right at the right moment, like the Batwang comic book, which I had, and some other things that go up for a little while and then come back down. And I guess I do sometimes think, well, maybe I should flip that, but I never get around to actually flipping them. I'm too busy doing other things. So, and with the comics my friend Bruce sent me, I feel like he might want them back someday, so I don't want to sell them. Plus, I like having them, so another reason not to. Another comic book confession is that when I first started looking for videos on YouTube about comics, and I encountered some of the people who I now realize were part of the YouTube comics community, I thought they were idiots. I mean, I thought these guys don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to make a professional video about comic books, but they're trying to. And then later that completely flipped on me, and I loved the people who were doing the lo-fi communications with other fellow comic book fans, and were not trying to do a channel and be professional. And that became my thing. It was like, like someone who will only get crudely recorded punk albums on 45 singles and nothing else or something. That's what I became with YouTube. But so that's another of my confessions. And then Brian from the channel Infrared Media. I feel like Brian and I go back a long way. I'm not sure how long. He says he has a few questions. what was the book that got you back into collecting if there was a break? So there have been a number of breaks, and one of the biggest was high school, around the time I got a driver's license and wanted to spend money on gasoline to take girls out on dates, and I sold all my comics and said I was never going to read comics again. And then I wandered into some comic book shops, I guess circa around 1980, and discovered Frank Miller's Daredevil, and that sucked me right back into comics. And then in the 90s, I drifted away from comics. I think was still occasionally reading stuff, in Sandman and that kind of thing. But it mostly completely drifted away and was not paying attention to what was going on. And I went to a writer's retreat of some kind around 2000 or 2001. And I was chatting with one of the other science fiction writers who lives here in Portland. And he said, there's some good comics out there. And I said, well, what's an example? And he told me about Planetary. So I ran out and got a bunch of Planetary issues. And then I was sucked back in. Although I was not sucked in as big a way. I still just kind of stuck to trades and wandering into comic book stores occasionally. Maybe that was around the same time there was also a whole bunch of Alan Moore comics coming out. And then I got really busy in the mid 2000s, and the final time I got sucked back in was when I bought my first iPad around 2010, and I started buying a whole bunch of Dark Horse comics. I guess those were the ones I wanted to show in my first haul. A whole bunch of Dark Horse comics, because Dark Horse was one of the first companies to really embrace digital on their own and not just tentatively put some of it out on Comixology. And that eventually, so it wasn't a specific comic.
I'm just a girl who loves guinea pigs, and he's not a dream, not an imaginary story.
We're both got themed t-shirts.
Yeah.
This is Quacking Duck, who has been on the channel longest of anyone else besides myself. And we discovered you first, filmed a video in
July
7th.
July 17th.
Oh, okay. July 7th, 2012. So about 2 or 3 months after. There we go.
Thanks.
2 or 3 months after I started. And you've been appearing ever since. You've been in 2 or 3 videos just recently. And so we got some questions for you.
Okay.
Are you ready to dive into them?
Yes.
Okay. The first question comes from Celia from Norway, who is a booktuber and a grade school teacher. And she says, can you recommend some graphic novels / comics for kids?
So I am actually very prepared for that question. And so I have a lot of graphic novels over here. It might take a while, but I'm going to share them with you. So my first group of graphic novels are the more realistic ones, which, I mean, even though I enjoy a good ridiculous comic book story, but like the high school type stories are what are popular. And so Diary of a Wimpy Kid, I'm not sure if it counts because there's a lot of text in there, but like it's, I know a lot of people would say it too. This is book number 14, so you can tell it's popular. But yeah, I would definitely recommend Diary of a Wimpy Kid to any kids wanting to read.
What age do you think you were when you started reading that?
I think I was like
8.
8. Then I would also recommend Real Friends. I think this one's kind of popular. It's sort of like, you've probably heard of like Sisters and Smile because it's based off of a real story. And yeah.
And Real Friends is based off a real story too.
Yeah. I read this like last year.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one, I just had it and I remembered it. It's just a comic about kids who are on a soccer team. So I just recommend it. It's good. And then this one I never got super into, but it's
What's it called?
Roller Girl. I never got super into, but it's popular, so I just put it in there anyway.
So you're recommending it
yeah.
kind of
it won an award
based on popularity,
and it's
not but your own interest.
It's not like I never got super into it, but And then there's a lot of Babysitters Club, and not all of them have been turned into graphic novels yet, but the Babysitters Club graphic novelization, I guess, is really good.
Those are really good.
Yeah.
Is that what first hooked you on the more realistic comics when you discovered Babysitters Club?
I think so, yeah. That's what first hooked. I don't know. I mean, I've liked sort of realistic fiction for a while, but like this, I really liked the Babysitters Club comics. And then here comes the ones that are both underrated and less realistic, which seems to go hand in hand, surprisingly. Which, this one is The Courageous Princess. I read it a while ago. I actually don't have book 1, but it looks a lot like book 2, but like the colors are different and stuff.
And there's 3 books total.
There's 3 books total.
Yeah.
And I think that the art is like really cool.
Right. And you liked these when you were quite young, and then your 18 or 19-year-old cousin managed to enjoy them a lot too.
Yeah. And then these ones I haven't read in forever, but like a while ago I read Zeta the Space Girl. I don't remember it that well, but I remember enjoying it at the time. So yeah, I have them in all the wrong order, but
right.
I mean,
but yeah, you enjoyed those a lot at the time. And you were probably 7 or 8 when we first got those.
Yeah,
would you say? Or even younger.
I think even younger.
Yeah.
Starts with her just normal life, and then she
really
gets
nice art style.
transported to this place. Sorry, I
kind
forgot
of reminds me of Calvin and Hobbes, the art style.
Yeah, the art style is a little bit Calvin and Hobbes-ish. I'm tired. And the last one I have to show is this Star Scouts. It's basically where like this human girl, I forgot what her name is because I read this like a year ago, but this was a gift to me from somebody. Thanks, somebody, for giving this to me. Because I don't really want to mention exactly who it is, because I'm not sure if that person wants to be mentioned. But yeah, here is it was really good. It's actually a really quick read, so if you want a quick read like this, probably. Basically, this girl goes to this like sort of like, instead of going to her like Girl Scouts thing, she goes to this Star Scouts thing with like aliens in space. So yeah, it's really good.
Okay, well, there's a related question from a really wacky, wild, and crazy YouTuber named The Gray Man. And he asks, what is your favorite ever comic story?
It's probably this thing that's like Supergirl in the 8th Adventures, Cosmic Adventures in the 8th grade. I'm sorry, but that has a lot of nostalgia value for me. I don't know if like adults would enjoy it. I don't know if I'd enjoy it if I hadn't read it when I was little.
Do you think Celia's grade school students would enjoy it, or is it
perhaps?
Do they need to be older?
The thing is, there is a lot of I feel like there's a lot of kind of things that are sort of. I feel like they make more sense if you read other like Supergirl related comics.
Right.
But other than that, I think
like if you already understand who Lex Luthor and Lena Luthor are.
Yeah, if you already understand, then it seems more funny to you, I feel like, how they present the characters.
Right.
You know.
You've read that one at least twice, maybe more.
I think I've read that one like 3 times. Like, for instance, it makes more sense if you already know who Lena Luthor is, but I mean, I think you can still enjoy it if you're not like it.
Okay, and Gore Vidal has a question for you. He's
Sorry. I think it's funny that there's just a guy that named himself Gore Vidal.
And Gore Vidal was actually the name of a famous author.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
From the 60s and 70s.
That's what I mean.
And I think he's no
just
longer
a girl
with us. But
who says,
now
you
we have
know
the
what I
new
mean
Gore
a
Vidal.
lot.
So Gore Vidal asks, QD, if your dad could be a superhero outside of being a great father already, which is guaranteed, right, that I'm a great father.
Yeah.
What comic book hero would he be and why?
Well, I mean, no teenagers think their father is great, but I'm not a teenager yet. But I feel like very loads. Yeah, I'm going to be 12 in about a month, so a year and a month away. Well, like a year and a month and a week. You know, never mind.
But you're deep into tween.
Yeah, I'm deep into tweenhood. But so I think we've been joking about this whole thing that he made this sound with his hands. So Quack Hands Man, or maybe Captain Comic Book Collector that has tons of comic books and he fights people with comic book boxes.
Oh, right. I remember you making up a character like that.
No, I didn't. But like, I made up this somebody was fighting somebody with comic book boxes. But like, no, it wasn't like a superhero or anything. It was just a guy that was selling comics. But what if you your superpower was you had a lot of comic books?
Is there any actual existing superhero in comics that you think would be a good match for me?
No, I don't know.
None of them?
What about Ambush Bug?
Ambush Bug. Oh, great. Yeah. Well, that works well for someone who's read a lot of comics.
Because you read a lot of comics, so you know they were fictional. So also sort of Gwenpool, I guess.
I could be Gwenpool.
Yeah, you could be
make a very good Gwenpool.
But like older Gwenpool.
Older, balder Gwenpool.
Yeah, older Gwenpool. I was patting your head like because I'm so much shorter than you.
Yes. Okay, well, those were cool answers. And I have some questions for you. Can I ask you some questions, or are you tired out?
Okay.
I would like you to tell us why you called yourself Quacking Duck, and do you still like that name?
I was like obsessed with ducks when I came up with my like, not stage name, but I guess like YouTube name.
YouTube name, right.
And then it just kind of stuck, so I'm okay with it. Like, it's just, as much as my grandmother would hate this word, a little bit iconic. Like,
it's your iconic
like it
name.
has to. Like, I feel like I wouldn't want to change it. One, for confusion. Two, it's just my name. Like, I'm pretty sure I just wouldn't want to change it.
So you don't mind being Quacking Duck, like, even though you're no longer obsessed by ducks.
Like, I'm not like a huge fan, but I don't really mind it.
In fact, you hardly ever think of ducks anymore.
I hardly even think like ducks don't exist in my brain anymore.
Right. There was a point where Mrs. Sleepyreader and Mr. Sleepyreader just thought that ducks were forever, that you would always like ducks.
I know. That was my phase for like so long.
Maybe 2 years or more. Maybe 3 years.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then I have one more question for you.
My Supergirl phase was pretty long though too.
Do you have any thoughts about having a dad who does YouTube comic book videos, good or bad?
It's that. Well, the thing is that people would like. I don't really get to discuss things other than comic books, and I have other interests, so it's a little bit annoying. Because
for when you come on my videos, you'd like to discuss other interests.
Like I have like other things that I like, so can I occasionally just bring up or make.
Sure, and you know what? A good
place
for that would be now that we realized that your anniversary is in July, your 8th anniversary, we were going to make a video just focused on you.
Also,
it's kind
of hard to decide, like if I want to be in a video or something. Not because sometimes I'm self-conscious or sometimes I'm just really tired. But like sometimes I just want to be in a video.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like it's like. I don't know, like sometimes it's tempting, but like I'm tired or something.
And sometimes we talk about making a video, but then we don't have any comic book to talk about. We want to review comics, but we haven't read any.
Remember that one video we put off for like a week?
It rings a faint bell.
With the one that was like unboxing the comics that your friend had sent to you.
Oh right, you helped me with
that.
We put that off for nearly 2 weeks because you were so not in the mood every time, or not feeling tired.
I'm sorry,
every time.
I was just
finally we did it, so maybe it was just a week.
Also, sometimes you forgot too. Sometimes you forgot.
I put off, yes, some nights I put it off, some nights you put it off.
It wasn't always during the night. I'm glad we didn't end up doing it during the night. Whatever, I'm getting off on weird topics.
So when you were little, you just thought every father made YouTube videos. And at some point you must have discovered, no, other people's fathers don't make YouTube videos.
I imagine that's what it's like being like, the kid of like royalty. Like you think everybody is that rich until you find out. Or like the kid of a celebrity, you just think everybody is rich and famous.
Right.
I'm sorry if you're like watching this and you're a kid of a celebrity.
Right. Doesn't everybody have Michael Jackson come to their birthday party?
But, like, I'm just saying, like, doesn't everybody have birthday parties that cost $2 million? And doesn't everybody have parents that are rich and famous?
Or in
and
your
they have
case, doesn't
gold
everybody have
binkies?
a dad who constantly talks about his comic books to cameras?
Kardashians.
Okay, well,
Just joking about that.
Cracking
sorry.
Duck will be back very soon, no
Sorry.
doubt. And
Yeah, my anniversary.
And you have that
will be
anniversary
July
video to look about.
17th.
And I'm going to make a playlist of some of her earliest videos because I think a lot of my videos get lost in the mists of time, but it's very interesting to see what she was like then. Back, I think she was about 4 when we first, maybe had just turned 4, like a month before we shot your first video.
What if we, like, combined my first video and, like, my most recent video
This one?
into, like, one video? Like, it was, like, first
I have to
video
figure out the
and
technology
the
to
most
do
recent
that.
video. Like, what if we just, like, took the clips and then put them together on iMovie or whatever?
Right, I just have to figure out how to download your first video onto my iPad. But once I figure that out, I could...
Yeah, I would just show a
edit
bit of
them
me
on.
then and show a
Right.
bit of me now. Like,
You also had a thought of doing a reaction video to some of your early videos.
yeah, that will be embarrassing. But okay, I want to do it anyway. I want to be embarrassed. I want to
Yes.
die of embarrassment. Okay, please let me die.
But
of
then you'll come
embarrassment.
back to life again, like every comic book character.
Yeah, you know, I'm like, his podcast never stayed dead.
Yes, give it a plug.
Not a dream, not an imaginary story.
Okay, on that note, maybe we'll close up this segment and
Yeah,
we'll come back
bye.
later. Bye-bye. So another confession. In all those years, in the 80s, early 90s, then back in the early 2000s, going into comic book shops, I had no idea what a pull list was, and I never had a pull list. So I think I learned about pull lists when I started watching YouTube. I think I maybe have heard the term pull list, and I saw that some people had comics reserved for them at the comic book shop, but I really didn't get the purpose of it. I didn't realize that, one, that you might miss out on comics. I just always thought that you could find the comics that you needed to find. And 2, I didn't realize there was such a thing as a pull list discount. I only started a pull list around the time I started on YouTube, or maybe either a few months before, a few months after I started on YouTube. I always just viewed comic book stores as a place you wandered into. I might have heard the term Wednesday Warrior a while back, or known that there was a special day when people came to the comic book store. But again, it didn't occur to me that comics sell out and you ought to go on the first day to make sure you get them. So I didn't really understand all of that till I hooked up with YouTube. So Paulo Costa asks, he says, congratulations on being entertaining for 8 years, which is a lot more than most TV actors are able to do. I question whether I'm that entertaining. But which leads to my question. Do you wish you could have more regular content with a steady format, or are you happy with just coming on when you have something interesting to say or show? So all of my role models were people who just came on and when something popped into their head and they had something interesting to show. I think back then even just the weekly haul was just beginning. Some people were already doing it and a lot of people weren't. Like I think first person I remember doing a weekly haul might have been a comic book mom. So I didn't come into YouTube with any thoughts about that, and later realized other people maybe were trying to be regular and have a real format. But like I said, I kind of viewed it as, a DIY punk rock kind of thing to do. So it's only much later that I might have thought about that. So I would think about it sometimes, but realizing I don't want to make money from this, and I guess that doesn't even matter. You might still want to do regular format. But I just realized that I'm just doing this to enjoy myself, and I will ruin the enjoyment if I try to force myself to any pattern or promise. Lately, I've enjoyed doing weekly comic book countdowns, but the moment I stop enjoying it, or when I'm too busy in a given week or haven't had a chance to read my comics, I don't force myself to read the comics faster just so I can get a video out. It just would mean that this channel would have been gone a long time ago. Because I don't want it to be work. It's just supposed to be fun. I've worked on, just like you, Paulo, I think you're still a freelance writer. I've been a freelance writer. I've worked on deadlines. And of course, at other kinds of jobs, you have deadlines all the time. And this is not about that. And it's awfully nice to say that I'm entertaining, because that isn't really about that either. And maybe some other questions will hit on this, but my initial motivation was just to be part of a conversation. And as it grew, I kind of realized it was also I don't want to use the word self-actualization, maybe an existential creation of self. It was a way to express a side of myself that I'd never expressed before. And I continue to view it mostly like that, as my public diary about certain things that interest me, but that also just expresses a side of myself. And by expressing yourself, you kind of create yourself or recreate yourself. So it's all about myself. Sorry to say that. Let's see. I wrote down a bunch of confessions because I can't keep track of them. Another confession, actually, this is kind of a big one. This is like almost a real confession, is that I have this weird phone phobia. And I've only in recent years sort of focused enough to realize that. But like a few people in YouTube early on gave me their phone numbers. I never called them. And another person I became friends with started calling me, and after a while I just told her I don't want to do phone calls. I'll spend months not calling up doctors and making appointments, or dentists or what have you. If I could just walk into their office, I'd make the appointment right away, but I just don't like using the phone. I do have long weekly phone calls with my mom, and I'm happy to talk with people I already know really well. But there's some mental block against phone calls. I want to be in a world where everywhere you just walk up and talk to people and you never have to call them. Like I don't even like calling in an order to have pizza delivered or something, although I do that. It's not a crippling phobia, but it is enough of a phobia that if any of you out there have felt like I should have given them a phone call, that might be why. Yeah, that's weird how much I started thinking about it that way because I have some friends who, as they got older, had developed a real phobia, fear of flying. And in some weird way, my phone phobia is the same. Okay, MedericRoger, living down in Mississippi, I believe. He has the question, what series would you like to have a complete set of, and why? And well, I have completed a lot of sets since I started this channel, and maybe, being part of this community makes me, stay on top of the hunt a little more. Although, like I've gotten not a complete Savage Sword of Conan collection, but all that I wanted, which was 1 through 100. And then I actually now am considering getting more. And I'm trying to think of other examples of ones I've completed. I have not completed my Conan, but again, that's not a complete run that I want. I want all the Barry Smith Conan and a limited amount of the John Buscema Conan. But Conan number 23, the first appearance of Red Sonja, has so far not appeared to me in a comic book shop locally, and I have yet to break down and go buy it online at some really large amount because of that first appearance. But I'll eventually get it. But, at times I've really wanted a complete Fantastic Four run, maybe say complete through the 80s, but definitely, that whole 60s run, and a complete Thor run. But after my mostly complete Thor run got stolen at some point, I stopped wanting to do that. And I had that complete Tomb of Dracula run, the Marv Wolfman, Gene Colan run from the 70s. And that got stolen from me, and I keep thinking about, do I want to recollect it? So a lot of these, maybe I'm shifting in my mind over to wanting to collect in omnibuses and that sort of thing, and just have certain issues just because I like owning those issues. Another run I completed was the complete black and white Planet of the Apes run from Marvel. I probably have a lot of other completed runs, but so the question was, what would I like to complete? And I don't see I'm not coming up with a good answer, except filling in holes of Conan and filling in holes in a lot of other stuff. I think I'd still like to someday do a complete Fantastic Four run. That would be really cool. So another confession is that I do not like plastic bags on comics. Now, of course, I do have a large percentage of my comics bagged and boarded, and I think the board is very useful, but I'm very turned off by the plastic. Now, when a comic's in Mylar, I actually like it a lot more. And I also once had this conversation with my friend who works at the Library of Congress, and he was just talking about books in general, but he said never, ever put them in plastic bags. So I don't know what to think about that. But yeah, most people, I suppose, have grown up with comics in bags and then later in bags and boards. But that was such an unusual thing when I was growing up that I feel like it gets in the way of me and my comic. And some of the comics I have in the best condition were just left in a drawer for 20 years with no bags and boards. But anyway, I will bag and board any of my comics that I think have some value for sure. Another question. Wait, I've lost track of it. Dang. Okay, from Stay Puff. Great guy. I've gotten to know him via YouTube recently, but apparently he's been watching a long time. Because he said he got back into comics in 2011, kind of like I did, after 5 years away from buying new comics. When he says, when I started watching comic book YouTubers, you, Sleepyreader, Joshua Hayes, and Ghost Critic, I hope he's doing okay. I haven't heard from him since his last video in 2018. Were the earliest people I subbed to. So you've been around watching us for quite a while, Stay Puff. And I might have missed when you first started your channel. But anyway, I'm glad I found you. And actually, I still see Ghost Critic on Twitter occasionally talking about comics or showing some food he's been cooking. So I think he's doing fine, and he's still reading comics, old and new. His Twitter output has slowed down in the last year also, but it still comes out every now and then. So his question is, any chance of me and Travis from Oddfellow Thoughts, another person he says he followed from around that time, get back together for the comic book roundtable? He says, I've always enjoyed listening to that show and the various people that showed up on there. As much as Saturday Night has grown with multiple live streams, well, boy, has it, of comic book YouTube content, I still feel the roundtable is missed. Yeah, the roundtable was Travis from Oddfellow Thoughts kept that going for a very long time, very consistently. I don't think it's officially gone. His life just got much crazier. And towards the end, when he was doing it, I think it was harder for him to find people who were free to come on, because there were so many more live programs going on, and also just because he, like many of us older YouTube, and I don't mean by age, but just having been on YouTube longer, actually find a lot of the people they used to know are no longer active. But I think mostly is his job and work life situation that keeps it from going. So I imagine someday it will exist again, because he made some comments on Twitter after I started using StreamYard that he wanted to learn how to use StreamYard. And that, for people who don't know, that was a very focused show. Every Saturday night, people would talk about that week's comics that they had read, and conversations would develop. So it was like a reviewing roundtable, sort of. Some people more reviewy than others. And he at one point it was just totally open to anybody, and it's still, last I knew, a fairly open invitation to join in. You just have to contact him, and he kind of has to know who you are. But yeah, so that was a lot of fun, and that was a big connector for the community for a long time. So I hope it comes back. Another confession is that I always am thinking that at some point YouTube is going to find a way to get rid of us. We can't, well, people like me and Travis can't be making YouTube any money. So maybe that whole StreamYard thing where they stopped supplying the software for doing Hangouts might have a lot to do with them trying to get rid of us little parasites on the system. But yeah, or maybe they realize that we're part of the whole ecosystem and that we help bolster up the whole thing and create more viewers in general for YouTube. YouTube seems to give gifts to us and take them away all the time. But I do constantly think someday this is going to end because YouTube is going to end it in some way.